The sky above the alien planet was a deep, unending shade of gray. It wasn't quite day, and it wasn't quite night, just an endless twilight that stretched across the horizon like a forgotten memory. The air was thick with humidity, and every breath felt heavy, as though the atmosphere itself was trying to suffocate anyone who dared set foot on this world. Somewhere in the distance, faint mechanical hums echoed to the dense forest, blending with the occasional rustle of unseen creatures moving between the trees. Alex Carter stood alone in the middle of what had once been his unit's landing zone. Around him lay the twisted wreckage of their dropship, its blackened hull still smoking from a crash. Bits of debris littered the ground, shattered pieces of metal, charred fragments of equipment, and scraps of uniforms that told the story of how quickly things had gone wrong. Alex adjusted the strap of his rifle, which hung loosely over his shoulder, and scanned the area one more time. There was no sign of movement, no survivors. It hadn't been supposed to go this way. When they first entered the planet's orbit earlier that day, everything seemed routine. Lieutenant Rachel Hayes, their commanding officer, briefed them on the mission: investigate strange energy readings coming from the surface. Nothing unusual about that. Humanity had been exploring planets like this for decades, searching for resources or signs of intelligent life. But something about this place felt off. Even before the crash, there was an uneasiness in the air, a tension that made everyone uneasy. The dropship malfunctioned almost immediately after entering the atmosphere. One moment, they were descending smoothly. The next, alarms blared and the ship lurched violently. By the time they hit the ground, chaos reigned. Flames erupted around them, and screams filled the cabin. Somehow, Alex managed to crawl out alive, dragging himself away from the burning wreckage just as the fuel tanks exploded behind him. He didn't know how many others had made it out, or if anyone else had survived at all. Now, hours later, he was still waiting for rescue, waiting for answers, waiting for someone, anyone, to come back for him. But so far, there was nothing, just silence. And the longer he waited, the more certain he became that help wasn't coming. Alex checked his communicator again, pressing the button repeatedly in hopes of getting some kind of response. Static crackled through the earpiece, loud and unyielding. Frustrated, he let out a sharp sigh and clipped the device back onto his belt. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "Just great." He glanced around, taking stock of his situation. The crash site was surrounded by towering trees whose trunks glowed faintly with bioluminescent patterns. Their leaves shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting the dim light of perpetual twilight. Everything here looked otherworldly, beautiful even, but also dangerous. Every instinct screamed at him to stay alert. This wasn't Earth. Anything could happen. And then, without warning, it did. A low growl rumbled through the forest, followed by the sound of snapping branches. Alex froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. Slowly, he turned toward the source of the noise, scanning the shadows between the trees. At first, he saw nothing. Then, shapes began to emerge, dark, angular forms that moved with unnatural speed. They circled him cautiously, keeping to the edges of the clearing. Alex tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart pounding in his chest. As they stepped into the open, Alex finally got a good look at them, and what he saw chilled him to the bone. These weren't animals. They were humanoid, but only barely. Their bodies were covered in sleek, insect-like exoskeletons that gleamed dully in the dim light. Long, spindly limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and their heads were elongated, dominated by large, multifaceted eyes that glowed faintly red. Mandibles clicked rhythmically as they moved, creating an eerie symphony of sound that sent shivers down Alex's spine. For a moment, neither side moved. Alex stood perfectly still, his rifle raised but not aimed directly at any one creature. He counted 6 of them, maybe 7, more than enough to overwhelm him if they decided to attack. But strangely, they didn't. Instead, they simply watched him, studying him with those glowing eyes as if trying to figure out what he was. One of the creatures stepped forward, separating itself from the group. It was slightly larger than the others, its carapace adorned with intricate patterns that might have been markings of rank or status. It tilted its head, mandibles clicking softly, as if attempting to communicate. Alex frowned, unsure what to do. Part of him wanted to shoot first and ask questions later, but another part, the part that had kept him alive this long, told him to wait, to think. Taking a slow, deliberate step backward, Alex lowered his rifle slightly, keeping it within easy reach but making sure it didn't appear threatening. He locked eyes with the creature, meeting its gaze head-on. For a few tense seconds, they stared at each other, neither flinching nor looking away. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "By who?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The creature paused, its mandibles stopping mid-click. Behind it, the others shifted uneasily, exchanging glances, as if confused by what they'd just heard. Alex repeated himself, louder this time. "I said by who?" This time, the creature reacted, its head tilted further, almost quizzically, and emitted a series of chirps and clicks that sounded vaguely like language. Whether it understood him or not, Alex couldn't tell, but one thing was clear. It hadn't expected this. None of them had. For reasons even Alex didn't fully understand, his question threw them off balance. They hesitated, their movements becoming less coordinated, as if unsure of what to do next. And in that hesitation, Alex found a sliver of hope. Whatever these things were, whatever they wanted, they weren't invincible. They could be surprised. They could be questioned. Maybe, just maybe, they could even be reasoned with. But as the moments dragged on, Alex knew he couldn't rely on words alone to save him. He needed a plan, and fast. Because while the creatures might be uncertain now, it wouldn't take much to tip the scales in their favor. And when that happened, Alex doubted he'd get another chance to ask his question. So he waited, watched, listened, hoping against hope that somehow, some way, he'd find a way out of this nightmare. His silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the alien forest and the occasional rustle of leaves. Alex stood frozen in place, his rifle still lowered but ready to be raised at a moment's notice. The creatures surrounding him had stopped moving entirely, their glowing red eyes locked onto him as if trying to decipher his words. For a few seconds, it felt like time itself had paused. Then one of them, the largest one with the intricate patterns on its exoskeleton, clicked its mandibles sharply and stepped forward. Alex tensed, his finger twitching near the trigger of his rifle. But the creature didn't attack. Instead, it tilted its head again, studying him intently. Its movements were deliberate, almost cautious, as if it was unsure how to respond. Behind it, the others shifted uneasily, their claws scraping against the ground. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "By who?" Alex repeated, slower this time, enunciating each word clearly. He wasn't sure why he kept asking the same question. It wasn't like they could understand him, but something about it felt important. Maybe it was a look of confusion on the lead creature's face. Or maybe it was just a desperate attempt to buy himself more time. Whatever the reason, it seemed to work. The creature let out another series of chirps and clicks, louder now, and gestured toward Alex with one of its clawed hands. It wasn't an aggressive gesture, more like a command. Alex frowned, glancing around at the other creatures. They hadn't moved closer, but they weren't backing off either. Their glowing eyes followed his every movement, watching him like predators stalking prey. "What do you want?" Alex asked, though he knew they wouldn't answer. Still, talking helped calm his nerves. It reminded him that he was still human, still alive. "You're not here by accident, are you? Someone sent you." The lead creature clicked again, this time accompanied by a low growl. It pointed at Alex, then made a sweeping motion with its arm, as if indicating the entire planet. Alex shook his head, trying to make sense of what it was trying to say. Was it claiming ownership of the planet? Warning him to leave? Or was it simply following orders like he suspected? "You don't even know, do you?" Alex muttered, mostly to himself. "You're just pawns in someone else's game." The creature's mandible snapped shut abruptly, and for a moment, Alex thought he'd pushed too far. But instead of attacking, it turned to the others and began clicking rapidly, its tone sharp and urgent. The rest of the group responded with their own series of chirps and growls, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Alex couldn't understand a single word, but the meaning was clear. They were arguing among themselves. This was his chance. If he could keep them distracted, maybe he could find a way out of this mess. Slowly, carefully, Alex took a step backward, keeping his eyes fixed on the creatures. None of them reacted immediately, too focused on their heated exchange to notice his movement. Emboldened, he took another step, then another, until he was close enough to the edge of the clearing to slip into the shadows of the forest. But before he could move any farther, the lead creature suddenly turned back toward him, its glowing eyes narrowing suspiciously. It let out a sharp bark, and the others instantly fell silent. All at once, they turned to face Alex, their bodies tense and ready to strike. He froze, realizing he'd been caught. "Okay," Alex said, raising his hand slightly in a gesture of surrender. "Easy now. I'm not looking for trouble." The lead creature clicked again, this time pointing directly at him. Then, with a swift motion, it signaled for the others to advance. Two of them stepped forward, their claws glinting menacingly in the dim light. Alex swallowed hard, his mind racing. He didn't have many options left. "Listen," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I don't know who sent you here, but you're making a mistake. You think you're doing the right thing, but you're just being used. Whoever gave you your orders, they don't care about you. They don't care about anyone." The creatures hesitated, exchanging confused glances. Clearly, they weren't used to hearing such defiance from their targets. Most humans probably screamed or begged for mercy when confronted by beings like them, but Alex wasn't most humans. He'd seen enough war zones, enough battles, to know that sometimes the best weapon wasn't a gun. It was words. "You're soldiers, aren't you?" Alex continued, taking a small step forward. "Just like me. We're not so different. Both of us following orders we don't fully understand. But you need to ask yourselves, orders from who? Who's pulling your strings?" The lead creature clicked sharply, cutting him off. It raised one of its claws and pointed at Alex, then made a slicing motion across its throat. The message was clear: stop talking, or else. But Alex wasn't ready to give up yet. "Fine," he said, shrugging. "Kill me if you want. But before you do, ask yourself one thing. Why? Why are you here? What's the point of all this?" For a moment, none of them moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, with a final, decisive click, the lead creature gestured for the others to grab Alex. Two of them lunged forward, grabbing his arms and pinning them behind his back. Alex struggled briefly, but there was no use fighting. He was outnumbered and outmatched. Within seconds, they had bound his wrists within metallic restraints that pulsed faintly with energy. As they dragged him away from the crash site, Alex couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. His questions might not have convinced him to let him go, but they had planted a seed of doubt. And in situations like this, doubt could be a powerful ally. They marched him through the forest for what felt like hours, though it was impossible to tell time under the planet's perpetual twilight. The trees grew denser as they moved deeper into the wilderness, their glowing trunks casting eerie shadows on the ground. Every step Alex took was accompanied by the sound of his captor's claws scraping against the rocky soil, a constant reminder of how precarious his situation was. Eventually, they reached their destination, a massive structure hidden deep within the forest. At first glance, it looked like a natural formation, a towering spire made of black stone that jutted out of the earth like a jagged tooth. But as Alex got closer, he realized it was anything but natural. The surface of the spire shimmered faintly, as if alive, and strange symbols carved into its sides glowed with an inner light. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a monument to some ancient power that Alex couldn't begin to comprehend. His captors led him inside through a wide archway at the base of the spire. The interior was vast and cavernous, filled with strange machinery that hummed softly in the background. Lights flickered along the walls, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the floor. In the center of the room stood another creature, one much larger and more ornate than the ones who had captured him. Its exoskeleton was adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered like liquid gold, and its eyes glowed brighter than the others, almost blinding in their intensity. This, Alex realized, was their leader. The smaller creatures brought him to a halt a few feet away from the leader and shoved him roughly to his knees. Alex gritted his teeth, refusing to show weakness. The leader clicked its mandibles slowly, studying him with those piercing red eyes. Then, without warning, it leaned down and extended one of its claws toward Alex's face. For a split second, he thought it was going to kill him, but instead, it tapped his forehead gently, almost curiously. "What do you want from me?" Alex asked, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "You've got me. Now what?" The leader didn't respond, at least not verbally. Instead, it turned to one of the smaller creatures and clicked sharply. The creature nodded and scurried off, returning moments later with a small device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a weapon. It handed the device to the leader, who held it up in front of Alex. A holographic image flickered to life above the device, showing a series of coordinates and lines of text written in an alien language. Alex squinted, trying to make sense of it, but the symbols meant nothing to him. After a moment, the leader pointed at the image, then at Alex, as if asking a question. "You think I know what this is?" Alex asked, shaking his head. "I'm just a soldier. I follow orders, same as you." The leader clicked again, this time sounding frustrated. It tapped the device again, highlighting a specific line of text, and pointed at Alex once more. Whatever it was trying to communicate, it clearly expected him to understand. "I don't know," Alex said, shrugging. "Maybe if you told me who sent you here, I could help. But until then..." The leader's mandibles snapped shut, and for a moment, Alex thought he'd pushed too far. But instead of attacking, it turned to one of the smaller creatures and clicked sharply. The creature nodded and hurried off, leaving Alex alone with the leader and the rest of the group. Minutes passed in tense silence. Alex tried to stay calm, focusing on his breathing and reminding himself that panicking wouldn't help. Finally, the creature returned, carrying what looked like a primitive translation device. It handed the device to the leader, who attached it to the side of its head. A mechanical voice crackled to life, speaking in broken, heavily accented English. "Orders received," the voice said. "Eliminate intruders." Alex frowned, leaning forward slightly. "Orders from who? Who gave you those orders?" The leader hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. Then, after a moment, it clicked sharply and shook its head. "Unknown," the mechanical voice replied. "Unknown," Alex repeated, his heart skipping a beat. "You mean you don't know who's giving you orders?" The leader clicked again, this time sounding almost offensive. "Orders must be followed." "No," Alex said firmly, shaking his head. "Not if you don't know where they're coming from. Think about it. Someone's using you. They're playing you like puppets." The leader's mandibles snapped shut, and for a moment, Alex thought it was going to attack. But instead, it turned to the other creatures and began clicking rapidly, its tone sharp and urgent. The others responded with their own series of chirps and growls, their voices rising in volume as the argument escalated. Alex watched silently, realizing that his words had struck a nerve. These creatures weren't mindless killers. They were soldiers, just like him. And soldiers, no matter how alien, hated being used. As the debate raged on, Alex allowed himself a small smile. He might not have escaped yet, but he'd planted a seed of doubt. And in a place like this, doubt could be the difference between life and death. The argument among the creatures continued, their sharp clicks and growls echoing through the cavernous chamber like an alien symphony. Alex sat on the cold, hard floor, his hands still bound behind his back with those glowing restraints. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as the leader and its subordinates debated heatedly. The leader's voice was louder now, almost frantic, while the others responded in short bursts, their tones ranging from defensive to uncertain. Whatever Alex had said, it had clearly struck a nerve. He couldn't understand their language, but he didn't need to. Their body language told him everything. Some of them gestured angrily toward him, their claws slicing through the air like knives. Others pointed at the holographic device, their movements urgent and insistent. A few even turned to each other, chirping softly, as if seeking reassurance or guidance. It was chaos, but not the kind of chaos that ended in violence. Not yet, anyway. Alex leaned back slightly, trying to appear relaxed despite the tension in the room. His mind raced, piecing together what little he knew. These creatures, the Vraks, as he'd started calling them in his head, were soldiers. That much was obvious. They followed orders without question, just like human soldiers did. But unlike humans, they seemed incomplete, fragile, even their hesitation, their confusion. It wasn't natural for beings who claimed to be superior hunters. Something about them felt off, like they were missing a crucial piece of themselves. And then there was the spire itself. The massive structure loomed over everything, its walls humming faintly with energy. Alex glanced around, taking in the details he hadn't noticed before. Strange carvings covered the surfaces, etched deep into the black stone. At first glance, they looked decorative, but as he studied them more closely, he realized they weren't random designs. They were symbols. Stories, maybe? Images of battles fought long ago, between species Alex didn't recognize. One carving showed a group of insect-like beings fighting against humanoid figures armed with crude weapons. Another depicted a massive machine towering over a battlefield, its limbs stretching out like tentacles, crushing everything in its path. Alex frowned, his eyes narrowing. There was something familiar about these images, though he couldn't quite place it. It was as if the carvings were hinting at a pattern, a cycle of conflict that repeated itself endlessly across time and space. Whoever controlled the spire wasn't just waging war against humanity. They were orchestrating wars everywhere. And the Vraks? They were pawns in someone else's game. As the argument dragged on, Alex decided it was time to take a risk. Slowly, carefully, he shifted his position, leaning forward until he caught the attention of one of the smaller Vraks guards standing near him. The creature's glowing red eyes flicked toward him, its mandibles clicking softly in warning. Alex ignored the implied threat and spoke quietly, keeping his tone calm and measured. "Hey," he said, nodding toward the guard. "You don't have to do this." The Vraks tilted its head, its claws twitching nervously. For a moment, Alex thought it might attack him, but instead it clicked softly, almost hesitantly. Encouraged, Alex pressed on. "I've seen your kind before," he lied, hoping the bluff would work. Always following orders, never asking questions, always dying for someone else's cause. "Doesn't that bother you?" The guard hesitated, its glowing eyes darting toward the leader, who was still arguing with the others. Then, slowly, it turned its gaze back to Alex. Its mandibles clicked again, softer this time, as if it was considering his words. "You think you're strong," Alex continued, lowering his voice even further. "But you're not. You're tools. Weapons. Someone else is pulling your strings, making you fight battles you don't understand. Do you really want to die for them?" The guard's claws flexed slightly, and for a split second, Alex thought he'd pushed too far. But then the creature stepped closer, its movements cautious but deliberate. It crouched down beside him, its glowing eyes locked onto his face. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with a soft click, the guard reached out and tapped Alex's restraints. Alex blinked, surprised. "What are you doing?" The guard didn't respond, at least not verbally. Instead, it extended one of its claws and sliced through the glowing bonds with surprising precision. The restraints fell away, leaving Alex's wrists raw but free. He stared at the guard, unsure what to say. Was this a trick? Or had his words actually gotten through? Before he could decide, the guard stood up and clicked sharply, drawing the attention of the leader and the others. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward them. The leader let out a low growl, its mandibles snapping shut angrily. It stepped forward, its claws raised threateningly. "What is the meaning of this?" The mechanical translator crackled, its voice cold and metallic. Alex stood up slowly, rubbing his wrist to restore circulation. He glanced at the guard who had freed him, then turned to face the leader. "I'm not your enemy," he said firmly. "Whoever gave you your orders, they're the ones you should be worried about." The leader clicked sharply, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Orders must be followed," the translator replied. "No exceptions." "Why?" Alex shot back, his voice rising slightly. "Because someone told you to? Because some voice in the sky said so? Don't you see how ridiculous that sounds? You're smarter than that." For a moment, no one moved. The leader's mandibles twitched, its claws flexing nervously. Then, With a sudden burst of anger, it lunged forward, grabbing Alex by the collar of his uniform. Its claws dug into his skin, forcing him to look directly into its glowing red eyes. "You dare question us?" the translator spat. "You dare challenge our purpose?" "I'm not challenging anything," Alex said, his voice steady despite the pain. "I'm trying to help you. If you keep blindly following orders, you'll end up dead, or worse. Is that what you want?" The leader hesitated, its grip loosening slightly. Behind it, the other Vracs exchanged uneasy glances, their chirps and clicks growing quieter. The guard who had freed Alex stepped forward, clicking sharply, as if defending him. The leader growled in response, shoving Alex away roughly. "This human speaks lies," the translator announced. "We will not listen." "No," Alex said, shaking his head. "You already are listening. That's why you're arguing. That's why you're doubting. Someone's been using you, and you know it." The leader let out a frustrated roar, its claws slashing through the air. But instead of attacking, it turned to the others and began barking commands, its tone sharp and commanding. The Vracs scrambled to obey, retreating to various parts of the chamber. Within moments, Alex found himself alone with the leader and the guard who had freed him. The leader clicked angrily, pointing at the guard and then at Alex. "This cannot happen again," the translator said. "Take him away." The guard hesitated, glancing at Alex. Then, with a soft click, it nodded and gestured for Alex to follow. Reluctantly, Alex obeyed, keeping his eyes fixed on the leader as they left the chamber. As they walked through the twisting corridors of the spire, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The Vracs weren't as united as they pretended to be, and that gave him hope. Hours passed as Alex and the guard explored deeper into the spire. The guard, whom Alex had mentally nicknamed Kale, after deciding it needed a name, led him through narrow passageways and dimly lit chambers, avoiding the larger groups of Vracs that patrolled the area. Kale moved silently, its glowing eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. Despite its earlier act of defiance, it seemed nervous, constantly checking over its shoulder as if expecting retaliation. Alex kept his questions to himself, knowing better than to push too hard. Instead, he focused on observing his surroundings. The deeper they went, the more ancient the carvings became. Some of them were faded, almost worn away by time, but others remained vivid, their intricate details telling stories of conquest and destruction. One image in particular caught Alex's eye, a massive sphere surrounded by smaller shapes, connected by lines of energy. It looked like a map, or maybe a network. "What is this place?" Alex asked finally, breaking the silence. Kale paused, turning to face him. Its mandibles clicked softly, almost apologetically. Then, with a hesitant gesture, it pointed at the carvings and mimed typing on an invisible keyboard. "A control center?" Alex guessed. "Is that what this spire is?" Kale nodded, its glowing eyes flickering slightly. It pointed at the carvings again, then at Alex, as if urging him to understand. "So someone's controlling you," Alex said slowly. "Someone inside the spire." Kale clicked sharply, nodding again. This time, it gestured toward the heart of the spire, where a faint pulsing light emanated from somewhere deep within the structure. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever was controlling the Vracs, it was close and powerful. "Can we stop it?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kale hesitated, its claws flexing nervously. Then, with a determined click, it nodded once more. Together, they continued onward, moving deeper into the spire. Finally, they reached their destination, a massive chamber filled with glowing machinery and pulsating energy. In the center of the room stood a swirling mass of light and data, suspended in midair like a living storm. It pulsed rhythmically, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. Alex stared at it, awestruck by its sheer presence. "This is it," he murmured. "The source." Kale clicked softly, stepping closer to the mass. It pointed at the swirling light, then at Alex, as if asking what he intended to do next. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "We shut it down," he said firmly. "Whatever it is, it's controlling you, controlling everyone. If we destroy it, maybe we can end this." Kale hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. Then, with a final, decisive click, it nodded. Together, they approached the swirling mass, ready to face whatever came next. The chamber was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. The swirling mass of light and data at its center pulsed with an otherworldly energy, casting shifting shadows across the walls. Strange symbols floated in the air around it, glowing faintly as if alive. The hum of machinery filled the room, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to resonate deep within Alex's chest. He felt small standing there, insignificant compared to the immense power radiating from the core. Kale stood beside him, its claws twitching nervously as it scanned the area. The Vrax guard clicked softly, glancing back toward the entrance they had come through. It was clear Kale was uneasy, afraid, even, but it didn't back down. Instead, it gestured toward the core, its movements sharp and deliberate, as if urging Alex to act quickly. Alex nodded, taking a step closer to the swirling mass. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was looking at. Was this some kind of artificial intelligence? A machine designed to control the Vrax and orchestrate wars across the galaxy? If so, how could he possibly shut it down? And more importantly, would destroying it solve anything or just make things worse? He turned to Kale, pointing at the core. "Do you know how this works?" he asked quietly. Kale tilted its head, its mandibles clicking softly in response. Then, with a hesitant gesture, it pointed at a series of panels embedded in the walls surrounding the core. Alex followed its gaze, noticing for the first time the intricate network of controls and displays. Some of them were active, their screens flickering with streams of alien text and blinking lights. Others appeared dormant, their surfaces dark and lifeless. "Okay," Alex muttered, more to himself than to Kale. "First, we figure out what these controls do. Then, we find a way to turn it off." Kale clicked again, stepping forward cautiously. It reached out with one of its claws and tapped gently on one of the panels. Immediately, the screen lit up, displaying a cascade of symbols and numbers that Alex couldn't begin to understand. He frowned, leaning closer to get a better look. There had to be a pattern here, something he could use to his advantage. "Can you read any of this?" Alex asked, glancing at Kale. The Vrax hesitated, then shook its head slightly. Its glowing eyes darted between the screen and Alex, as if trying to convey that it understood the importance of the task, but lacked the knowledge to help directly. "All right," Alex said, sighing. "No problem. We'll figure out together." He began examining the panels one by one, searching for anything familiar. Most of the displays were incomprehensible, their symbols too alien to decipher. But after several minutes of careful study, he noticed something unusual, a small section of text written in a language that looked vaguely human. It wasn't English, but it resembled a script he'd seen before during his training, an ancient coding language used in early human starships. Alex's heart skipped a beat. If he could access this part of the system, maybe he could reprogram it, or at least disable it temporarily. But doing so would require tools he didn't have. He glanced around the chamber, his eyes scanning the equipment scattered along the walls. Among the debris, he spotted what looked like a portable terminal, its surface cracked but still functional. "Perfect," Alex whispered, grabbing the device. He connected it to one of the panels, watching as lines of code began scrolling across the screen. The language was outdated, but it was manageable. With enough time and a little luck, he might be able to override the system. As Alex worked, Kale kept watch, its glowing eyes darting toward the entrance every few seconds. The Vrax's nervousness was contagious, and Alex found himself glancing over his shoulder constantly, half expecting reinforcements to storm in at any moment. But for now, the chamber remained eerily quiet, save for the steady hum of the core. Minutes passed, each one feeling longer than the last. Alex focused intently on the terminal, his fingers moving quickly as he typed commands into the ancient system. The process was slow and painstaking, requiring him to guess at certain sequences and backtrack whenever he hit a dead end. Sweat dripped down his forehead, stinging his eyes, but he ignored it, determined to finish what he'd started. Finally, after what felt like hours, he found what he was looking for, a subroutine responsible for transmitting orders to the Vrax. Whoever, or whatever, was controlling them relied on this program to maintain its grip. Disabling it wouldn't destroy the core entirely, but it would sever connection, freeing the Vrax from its influence. Alex hesitated, his finger hovering over the final command. This was it, the point of no return. Once he executed the sequence, there was no telling how the system would react. It might collapse peacefully or might trigger a catastrophic failure, destroying the entire spire and everyone inside it. "Here goes nothing," Alex muttered, pressing the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar, the core began to destabilize. The swirling mass of light and data expanded rapidly, sending shockwaves rippling through the chamber. Alarms blared, and red warning lights flashed across the walls. Kale let out a sharp click, backing away from the core as the ground beneath them trembled violently. "We need to go," Alex shouted, grabbing the Vrax by the arm and pulling it toward the exit. "Now!" Kale resisted for a split second, its glowing eyes fixed on the collapsing core. Then, with a decisive nod, it turned and sprinted alongside Alex, their footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors as they fled the chamber. Behind them, the spire groaned under the strain of the destabilizing core. Sections of the ceiling collapsed, sending chunks of black stone crashing to the floor. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the air grew thick with smoke. Alex coughed, shielding his face with one hand as he pushed forward, determined to reach safety before the entire structure came down. They reached the main entrance just as the ground gave another violent lurch. Outside, the forest stretched endlessly in every direction, its glowing trees swaying ominously in the twilight. Without hesitation, Alex and Kale bolted into the wilderness, putting as much distance between themselves and the spire as possible. Moments later, an ear-splitting explosion rocked the planet. A massive column of light shot into the sky, illuminating the horizon like a second sun. The shockwave knocked Alex and Kale off their feet, sending them tumbling to the ground. Alex rolled onto his back, staring up at the blazing pillar of energy as it slowly faded into darkness. When the trembling finally stopped, Alex sat up, brushing dirt and debris off his uniform. Beside him, Kale stirred, its glowing eyes dimmer than before but still alert. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, catching their breath and taking the aftermath of what they had done. "So," Alex said finally, breaking the silence, "think we broke it?" Kale clicked softly, tilting its head thoughtfully. Then, with a soft chirp, it gestured toward the distant wreckage of the spire. Smoke rose lazily from the ruins, curling into the twilight sky like ghostly tendrils. Whatever had been controlling the Vrax was gone now, destroyed along with the core. But as Alex stared at the smoldering remains, a new worry began to creep into his mind. Destroying the core had freed the Vrax, yes, but it had also left behind unanswered questions. Who, or what, had built the spire in the first place? And why had it been designed to manipulate entire species into waging endless wars? Before he could dwell on those thoughts further, a sound caught his attention, the distant hum of engines. He turned his head sharply, scanning the horizon. At first, he saw nothing. Then, emerging from the clouds above, a sleek human vessel descended toward the crash site where it all began. Alex's heart sank. Reinforcements. Lieutenant Rachel Hayes and her team had finally arrived. Too late to save anyone, but just in time to witness the destruction. As the ship touched down, Alex stood up, brushing himself off once more. Kale followed suit, its glowing eyes narrowing as it watched the humans disembark. Lieutenant Hayes stepped out first, her expression unreadable as she surveyed the scene. Behind her, a group of soldiers fanned out, their weapons drawn and ready. "Carter," Hayes called, her voice sharp and commanding. "Report." Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he knew would be a difficult conversation. "Ma'am," he began, stepping forward. "It's complicated." Hayes raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking briefly to Kale before returning to Alex. "Complicated?" "Yes, ma'am," Alex replied. "The Vrax!" They weren't acting alone. Something was controlling them. "I disabled it, but you destroyed the spire," Hayes finished, her tone flat. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I saved us," Alex shot back, his voice rising slightly. Whatever was in that spire, it was manipulating both sides. If I hadn't stopped it, we'd still be fighting for no reason. Hayes stared at him for a long moment, her jaw tightening. Then, with a sigh, she turned her attention to Kale. And this one, he helped me, Alex said quickly. Without him, I wouldn't have made it out alive. Hayes exchanged a glance with one of her officers, who shrugged uncertainly. Clearly, none of them had expected to encounter an alien ally, not after everything that had happened. After a moment, Hayes nodded reluctantly. Fine, she said, lowering her weapon, but we're taking it with us. For now. Kale clicked softly, stepping closer to Alex as if seeking reassurance. Alex placed a hand on his shoulder, giving it a reassuring pat. You'll be okay, he murmured. We'll figure this out together. As the group boarded the ship, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was only temporary. The spire was gone, but the questions it had raised remained. Someone or something had been pulling the strings, orchestrating conflicts across the galaxy, and until they uncovered the truth, humanity and the Vrax would never truly be safe. The human ship hummed softly as it ascended into the sky, leaving the alien planet behind. Inside, Alex sat on a cold metal bench in the cargo hold, his arms resting on his knees. The adrenaline that had fueled him during the chaos at the spire was fading now, replaced by exhaustion and unease. Across from him, Kale, the Vrax who had helped him, stood silently, its glowing red eyes dim but still watchful. It didn't understand much of what was happening, but it seemed to sense Alex's tension. Around them, the rest of the crew moved about their tasks, occasionally glancing at Kale with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Lieutenant Rachel Hayes stood nearby, her arms crossed as she studied both Alex and the alien. Her expression was unreadable, though Alex could tell she was weighing her options carefully. So, Hayes said finally, breaking the silence, you destroyed the spire. Alex nodded, keeping his voice calm despite the weight of her gaze. Yes, ma'am. I had to. Whatever was inside it, it was controlling the Vrax. And maybe more than just them. Hayes frowned, her brow furrowing slightly. That doesn't explain why you brought one of them back with you. He saved my life, Alex replied firmly. If it wasn't for Kale, I wouldn't have made it out of there alive. He deserves a chance. A chance? Hayes repeated, raising an eyebrow. You realize we don't even know if these things can be trusted. For all we know, they're just waiting for the right moment to attack. They're not mindless killers, Alex shot back, his tone sharper than he intended. They were being used, same as us. Whoever built that spire, they're the real enemy. Hayes stared at him for a long moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, with a sigh, she turned her attention to Kale. Fine, she said reluctantly. But if this thing so much as twitches wrong, it's going straight into containment. Kale clicked softly, tilting its head as if trying to understand. Alex placed a hand on its shoulder, giving it a reassuring nod. It'll be okay, he murmured. Just stay calm. As the ship continued its journey back to orbit, Alex found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. The spire was gone, yes, but the questions it had raised lingered like shadows in his mind. Who, or what, had created it? Why had it been designed to manipulate entire species into waging endless wars? And most importantly, how many other structures like it existed across the galaxy? He glanced at Kale, who was sitting quietly now, its claws resting gently on the floor. Despite everything, Alex felt a strange sense of camaraderie with the alien. They had fought side by side, risking their lives to stop something neither fully understood. In a way, they weren't so different after all. Do you think your people will listen? Alex asked softly, knowing Kale couldn't understand him but needing to say the words anyway. Will they see the truth? Kale clicked softly, its glowing eyes flickering slightly. Whether it was a gesture of agreement or simply acknowledgement, Alex couldn't tell, but it gave him hope. Hours later, the ship docked with the larger carrier vessel waiting in orbit. As the airlock opened, Alex stepped off first, followed closely by Kale. The sight that greeted them was unexpected. Dozens of humans and Vrax standing side by side, their weapons lowered and their expressions wary but hopeful. It seemed word of what had happened on the planet below had spread quickly. Lieutenant Hayes walked ahead, addressing the crowd. "We've got a lot to figure out," she said, her voice carrying over the assembled group. "But one thing is clear. Whatever was controlling both sides, it's gone now. That gives us a chance to start over." A murmur rippled to the crowd, and Alex noticed several Vraks exchanging clicks and chirps, their tones softer than before. Clearly, the destruction of the spire had affected them deeply. Some even approached Kale, clicking hesitantly as if seeking guidance. Kale responded with sharp, decisive clicks, gesturing toward Alex as if introducing him. One of the Vraks stepped forward, a taller, older-looking creature with intricate patterns etched into its carapace. It clicked sharply, drawing everyone's attention. When it spoke, its mechanical translator crackled to life, its voice rough but clear. "We were misled," the translator announced. "Orders came from the spire. We followed without question. Now we see the truth." A hush fell over the room as both humans and Vraks processed the statement. For years, perhaps centuries, they had been enemies, locked in a cycle of violence orchestrated by forces beyond their control. But now, with the spire destroyed, they had a rare opportunity to break free from that cycle. "What happens next?" Alex asked, stepping forward. "Are we still enemies? Or can we work together?" The lead Vrax tilted its head, its mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Then, after a moment, it extended one of its claws toward Alex in a gesture that looked almost like a handshake. Alex hesitated, then reached out, clasping the claw gently with his hand. "Peace," the translator said simply. A cheer erupted from the crowd, echoing through the chamber. Humans and Vraks alike began talking animatedly, their voices blending together in a cacophony of relief and cautious optimism. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. Later that evening, Alex stood alone near one of the ship's observation windows, staring out at the stars. The alien planet hung in the distance, its surface shrouded in twilight. Behind him, Kale approached silently, clicking softly as it joined him. "You did good," Alex said, glancing at the Vraks. "Your people are starting to see the truth. That's more than anyone could have hoped for." Kale clicked again, its glowing eyes flickering faintly. Then, with a soft chirp, it pointed toward the stars outside the window. Alex followed its gaze, his thoughts drifting to the countless worlds scattered across the galaxy.